Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me. It's me, I know, back here, and I decided to tell you a little bit of a true crime story that's been really have me perturbed and feeling a certain kind of way. So let's get into it. This is the story of Lewis Howell. Lewis Howell was the owner and director of the Howell Morning Glory Funeral Chapel. At the time, Lewis was 53 years old. This is the time when some things happened with Mr. Lewis Howell. I'm probably going to call him Lewis mostly because I like his name. Anyway, Lewis was paid by the city about $100 to $450 to cremate and or bury the deceased remains of the citizens of Jacksonville, Florida. Officials did not know that Mr. Lewis Howell had been doing other things with these bodies. Lewis bought the funeral home in 1978, and although his performance was described as quote-unquote marginal, he was given the responsibility of helping the low-income citizens of Jacksonville, Florida, to bury their loved ones, and also a lot of the transient people, so like homeless and such. The problems with Howell's funeral home began in 1982 when a routine inspection found that Lewis had been using rusty tools for the embalming bodies and also using a plywood table instead of the standard stainless steel table. They also found Lewis was operating under a lapsed license, and the check of that he wrote for his license renewal had bounced not once, but twice, my friends. Also, guys, before I continue on, can we see how relaxing this is pouring this resin? And so that's what I've been doing, working on some projects and such. So, yeah. Anyways, enjoy. Let's get back to the story of Mr. Lewis Howell. In April of 1983, the State Board of Funeral Directors and Embalmers suspended his license due to poor job performance. 1 month later, the Howell Funeral Home received a favorable inspection, and Lewis was able to continue his job as his suspension was also overturned. Months later, the same board ordered Lewis to pay a $1,000 fine and placed him on probation for 2 years. He was also required to submit quarterly reports and an annual appearance to the board to review his job performance. In May of 1987, he was cited for unsanitary and unhealthy conditions. At that time, investigators discovered body fluids on the table and floor, and there was also a quote-unquote repulsive odor. 1 month later, Lewis once again received another good report for correcting his practices and continued working for the city. Funeral homes are usually inspected every 2 years, but given Lewis's past indecencies, the inspectors decided to check on Lewis the year earlier, on June 6, 1988. Tom Gallagher, the former secretary of the Department of Professional Regulations, and his inspectors were about to find some kind of gruesome stuff. 49 in total. There's a kind of a discrepancy between 44 and 49, so we'll give it a 49 decomposed bodies and including that a fetus were found inside the Howell Morning Glory Chapel funeral home. Bodies were found stacked on top of each other and in closets. At this point, I kind of want to reiterate, if I haven't said it already, it's better time than ever, to let you all know that this is taking place in Jacksonville, Florida. And this chapel, this Howell Morning Glory Chapel funeral home, had no refrigeration system for these bodies. Okay, let's just swallow that a little bit. And upon entering this home, they found 2 bodies in a hearse outside the funeral home. And one of the men who were assisting Mr. Howell with these bodies said that they had been there since Friday. Now, this discovery happened on the following Wednesday, so we're talking 6 days. 6 days. A 41-year-old and an 81-year-old men, were left outside in a closed hearse in the hot weather of Jacksonville, Florida. Okay. The rest of the bodies upon this inspection, of course, were immediately removed and transferred to another funeral home where they were properly cremated and other family members were notified. Lewis accused the city for the lack of payments and that were no assistance and little help with the embalming and cremation processes. Lewis was charged with 42 criminal counts and 6 felony counts alleging that he accepted money without performing the funeral services. Now, at about this time, you're thinking, whoa, this is some crazy shit, Mr. Lewis Howell. This is not so mourning and this is not so glorious. But guess what? Here's the capper, guys. He was married. He was living in this home with his wife. And I'm going to get a little bit more into the details of this case. Okay? Margaret, at the end of this investigation and this discovery, said, quote unquote, that her husband was a proud man who didn't want to admit that he has a problem, and that her husband did bury, in fact, the bodies that were contracted by the city. Lewis pled guilty to 3 counts of grand theft for not performing funeral services and cremations paid from the city. As a plea arrangement, prosecutors dropped to 36 misdemeanors and counts of fraud. I'm guessing that they probably didn't have enough proof of this, and he did not have to pay any restitution, and he was ordered to go to jail. Let me just double check here. Lewis Howell served a total of 2 months, 2 3/4 months, so I believe it worked out to be 11 weeks of jail time for this. Let's just think about that for a second. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you, I've been really into Dr. G, medical examiner, and I'm not paid for this, by the way. I get into that rabbit hole. So I was actually watching this Dr. G episode. It is, by the way, season 2, episode 19, called Deadly Business. And this is an actual case, one of her first cases that she had began her career as a forensic pathologist. Now let's get back a little bit more, okay, about why this is making me crazy a little bit. The shocking and most alarming thing about all of this is not only did the Mr. and Mrs. Lewis Howell live there, but let's get into where these bodies were discovered. Like, guys, there were bodies stashed in various rooms and in plain sight. In Lewis's office, in the hallways, the garage, and they were wrapped in some like really flimsy plastics and sheets even. 2 bodies at a time were piled on top of each other and put in boxes and in coffins. Get this, there was a 300-pound woman lying on a stretcher and put in the middle of their kitchen where they prepare food, where they eat. Okay? Whew. Okay, I had to take a breather for a second. Now, just when you think, okay, Stiletto, that's gotta be it, man. No. Unfortunately, ma'ams and sirs, they discovered behind a wall, kind of like I believe it's like a kind of a fake wall type of thing. And it was, as cops do, they're like, hey, this looks kind of interesting. So they break open this wall, and what did they find? More bodies, of course. But they weren't just bodies. Some were mummified, some were skeletonized, some were decomposing, some were liquefied. Some weren't there for very long. Some were, I think they find one was flattened like a pancake. And at the time in 1988, there was no law to cover crimes like this. Like, what do you even charge this guy with, right? And so they had to find a way to prove that he did some kind of crime. And obviously he accepted money, which was obviously a fraud, for not burying these people. It was just an unbelievable true crime case, guys. And it's been sticking in my head. And that's why I went down this hole, because I was like, I had to do more and more research about this and just figure out what this is all about. Anyway, guys, as you can see, this is the end of the show, but I hope you enjoyed it. Check out my social medias and check out stilettosupermom.com. Thanks for joining, guys. Peace.